The days of narcissistic abuse victims disappearing in silence are over. I'm Daniel Reinkotler, the author of Voiceless No More, The Legal War on Narcissistic Abuse. This book does not exist to soothe discomfort, it exists to correct the record. For decades, survivors of narcissistic abuse and psychological warfare were told to heal quietly, to move on, to stop talking, to stop being emotional, to stop making people uncomfortable. Their pain was erased, dismissed, and reframed as a personal weakness rather than inflicted harm. Not because the damage was unclear, but because acknowledging it was inconvenient. Society didn't fail to address narcissistic abuse. Society chose not to understand it, because understanding would require accountability, and accountability disrupts comfort, power, and image. Narcissistic abuse is not a relationship issue. It's not a mutual conflict or miscommunication. It's a sustained pattern of coercive control, psychological domination, and neurological injury. It is deliberate, cumulative, and designed to destabilize a person's sense of reality and self. When survivors speak about the abuse, a harm does not end. A second injury begins. The first injury is abuse itself. The second injury is how society responds to the survivor. Survivors come forward and are met with disbelief, minimalization, and blame. They are asked why they stayed, why they didn't leave sooner, and why they're still talking about it. Courts demand calm narratives from people whose nervous systems were under siege for years. Friends demand forgiveness from people who are still bleeding. Institutions demand proof of harm that was designed to leave no visible marks. This is not neutrality, this is systematic dismissal, and it re-traumatized survivors again and again. Survivors are labeled too emotional, too intense, too angry, but the truth is simpler and far more uncomfortable. They're reacting exactly as an injured person would. Narcissistic abuse works by destabilizing reality itself. Gaslighting fractures memory, perception, and trust in one's own mind. Intermittent reinforcement rewires the brain around survival. Chronic fear locks the nervous system into threat. These aren't character flaws, these are neurological injuries. Instead of naming the injury, society medicalizes the survivor. They're labeled as disorder, reactive, or unstable. Meanwhile, their abuser is reframed as charming, successful, or misunderstood. That contrast is not accidental, it's a cultural bias. Our systems protect appearances over patterns, power over pain, and comfort over truth. And when survivors refuse to disappear quietly, they are punished for it. That punishment is a second injury. Voiceless No More, The Legal War on Narcissistic Abuse exists to expose that second injury. It draws a clear line between harm and accountability, between reaction and provocation, between pathology and a survivor's response. It challenges a recovery culture that tells survivors to heal in isolation, while the structures that harm them remain untouched. Healing doesn't mean silence. Healing does not mean compliance. Healing does not mean pretending the system works when it doesn't. Healing requires truth, and truth is disruptive. That's why survivors are told to move on instead of being hurt, why they're encouraged to self-soothe instead of seek justice. That's why their anger is framed as dangerous, while the abuse is framed as private. This isn't recovery, this is containment. Voiceless No More, The Legal War on Narcissistic Abuse reframes narcissistic psychological abuse as what it actually is. Psychological warfare that produces predictable, neurological, and behavioral outcomes. When this framework is applied, survivor behavior stops looking irrational and starts looking injured. This book is not about revenge, it's about record, documentation, pattern recognition. Narcissistic abuse thrives in isolation and denial. It collapses under evidence and exposure. This is why survivors speaking out matters. Silence was never healing, silence was a goal. The days of quiet suffering are over. Survivors are not here to be palatable. They're not here to be accused. They're here to be accurate, to name the harm, expose the systems that enable it, and dismantle the narratives that keep them voiceless. If society is uncomfortable, that discomfort is overdue. Because what is truly dangerous is not survivors telling the truth. It's what happens when we force them to carry both the abuse and society's denial and the shame at the same time. Voiceless No More is a demand for accountability, not only from abusers, but from the systems that protect them. It's a declaration that survivors are done disappearing, they're done being erased, and they're done being injured twice. This isn't recovery as silence, it's recovery as truth. Voiceless No More, The Legal War on Narcissistic Abuse is available now on Amazon.